I was 7 years old when I watched my mother count out 20 crumpled dollar bills on the kitchen counter of our motel room. It was everything we had left in the world. She smoothed each bill carefully, her hands shaking, while I sat cross-legged on the stained carpet eating cereal without milk. We had been living in that motel for 3 months, ever since my father died and the medical bills swallowed our house, our car, and everything else we owned. My mother's name was Diana Patterson, and she worked 3 jobs trying to keep us fed and sheltered. She cleaned offices at night, worked the breakfast shift at a diner, and did people's laundry in the afternoon. I rarely saw her sleep. When she did, it was for maybe 2 or 3 hours at a time, always with her shoes still on, as if she might need to run at any moment. I learned to be quiet during those precious hours, sitting in the corner with my coloring books, making sure not to wake her. The motel manager was a man named Gerald Briggs, and he was the kind of person who smiled when he had power over you. Every Friday, my mother would hand him cash for another week's stay. He would count it slowly, making her wait, sometimes recounting it just to watch her squirm. He knew we had nowhere else to go. He knew she was desperate, and he enjoyed it. That particular morning, my mother had received a letter. I watched her read it 3 times, her lips moving silently. Then she looked at me with something I had not seen in her eyes for a long time. It might have been hope, or maybe it was just the last gasp of someone drowning who sees something that might be driftwood. She told me we were going to look at a house. I did not understand. We could barely afford the motel room. How could we afford a house? But I had learned not to ask too many questions. I simply put on my only pair of shoes, the ones with the sole coming loose, and followed her out into the cold November morning. The bus ride took 40 minutes. My mother held the letter in one hand and my hand in the other, gripping both so tightly I could feel her pulse. She kept checking the address, even though I knew she had memorized it. When we finally got off at our stop, we walked 6 more blocks into a neighborhood I had never seen before. The houses here were old, some of them abandoned, with broken windows and overgrown yards. It was not a nice area, but compared to the motel, it looked like possibility. The house was at the end of a street called Maple Grove, which was ironic because there were no maples and no grove, just cracked sidewalks and chain-link fences. It was small, maybe 900 square feet, with peeling gray paint and a porch that sagged in the middle. Several windows were broken, and the yard was nothing but weeds and garbage. My mother stood in front of it for a long time, just staring. Then she knocked on the door of the house next door. An elderly woman answered, suspicious at first, but my mother had a way of talking to people that made them soften. Her name was Mrs. Helen Kowalski, and she had lived on that street for 40 years. She told us the house had been abandoned for 2 years after the owner died. The city had taken possession of it due to unpaid taxes. They were auctioning it off, and the minimum bid was $20. My mother asked if that was real. Mrs. Kowalski said it was. The city just wanted someone to take responsibility for it, to keep it from being a complete eyesore and drug den. It needed thousands of dollars in repairs, maybe tens of thousands, which was why nobody had bid on it yet. Most people looked at it and saw a money pit. My mother looked at it and saw a chance. We went to the city municipal building that afternoon. My mother filled out forms with hands that would not stop shaking. I sat beside her, swinging my legs, watching other people come and go with briefcases and important expressions. We did not look like we belonged there. My mother's jacket had a tear in the sleeve and my shoes squeaked on the polished floor. But she kept writing, kept answering questions, kept pushing forward. The clerk, a tired woman named Patricia Ruiz, processed the paperwork. She looked at my mother with something like pity, then something like respect. She explained that if my mother bid $20 and no one else bid higher, the house would be hers, but she would be responsible for all repairs, all code violations, all back fees. My mother said she understood. She placed the $20 bills on the counter. Patricia counted them, stamped the forms, and told us the auction would be finalized in 1 week. We walked back to the motel in silence. I could tell my mother was terrified of hopping. Hope was expensive when you had nothing. But I also saw her walking a little taller, her shoulders a little less hunched. That night, she did not go to her night job. Instead, she sat on the motel bed and cried quietly while I pretended to sleep. I had learned that sometimes adults needed to cry without an audience. Gerald Briggs noticed something different about her when she paid for the next week. He made some comment about her seeming chipper, asked if she had won the lottery. My mother said nothing, just took the receipt and walked away. But I saw him watching her, and I saw the calculation in his eyes. Gerald was the kind of man who needed to know everyone's business, especially if he could use it against them. The week crawled by. My mother worked her jobs and I went to school, where the other kids had learned to avoid me because my clothes smelled like the motel, and I never had money for lunch. My teacher, Mr. Carson Dupree, was one of the few people who was kind to me. He would sometimes leave an extra sandwich on my desk, pretending he had packed too much lunch. I knew he did it on purpose, but I appreciated that he let me keep my dignity. On the day of the auction finalization, my mother took me out of school early. We went back to the municipal building and Patricia called us up to her desk. She told us that no other bids had been received. The house was ours. She handed my mother a set of keys that looked older than I was, and just like that, we were homeowners. My mother cried right there in the municipal building, and this time she did not try to hide it. We went to see the house immediately. My mother unlocked the front door and it swung open with a horror movie creak. Inside, it was worse than the outside. The floors were rotted in places, the walls had holes, and there was a smell I cannot even describe. Mold, rot, animal droppings, and something else underneath it all. But there were also bones of something good. High ceilings, big windows, solid brick construction. My mother walked through every room and I followed, stepping carefully over debris. That night we told Gerald Briggs we would be moving out at the end of the month. His smile disappeared. He told my mother she had signed a month-to-month agreement and needed to give 30 days notice. My mother showed him the notice she had written, dated properly, everything legal. He looked at it like it was a personal insult. Then he asked where we were going. My mother, in a rare moment of satisfaction, told him we had bought a house. The look on his face was worth everything. Disbelief, then anger, then something calculating. He asked where this house was. My mother told him it was none of his business. He said fine, but she better make sure the room was spotless when we left, or he would keep her deposit. We both knew there had been no deposit. We both knew he was just trying to maintain some power over her. My mother said the room would be clean. We spent the next 2 weeks preparing to move. We did not have furniture, and what little we owned fit into garbage bags and cardboard boxes. Mrs. Kowalski, the neighbor, heard we were moving in and came over with cleaning supplies, some old towels, and a casserole. She became the first in a series of unexpected angels. When people heard our story, some of them wanted to help. Not everyone, not even most people, but enough. A man from my mother's church, Pastor Vincent Morales, organized a group to help clean the house. About 15 people showed up on a Saturday morning with mops, buckets, trash bags, and work gloves. I had never seen anything like it. They ripped out the rotted floors, patched the walls, cleared out years of accumulated trash. My mother worked alongside them, crying periodically, thanking everyone over and over. I helped too, carrying small bags of trash, sweeping, feeling for the first time like I was part of something bigger than our struggle. By the end of that day, the house was not perfect, but it was livable. The holes were patched, the trash was gone, and the smell was mostly aired out. Someone donated an old couch. Someone else brought 2 mattresses. Another person installed new locks on the doors. We still did not have a kitchen table or dressers or most of the things people consider normal, but we had walls and a roof and a door we could lock. We had a home. We moved in on a Tuesday. My mother carried me over the threshold like it was a wedding, both of us laughing, both of us crying. That first night, we slept on the mattresses on the floor with no bed frames, no sheets that fit properly, but neither of us cared. I fell asleep listening to my mother breathe, hearing the sounds of our house settling around us, feeling safe for the first time in months. The problem started almost immediately. The house was old, and old houses have issues. The plumbing was a disaster. The electrical was worse. The heating barely worked and winter was coming. My mother tried to fix what she could herself, watching YouTube videos on a phone she borrowed from Mrs. Kowalski, making trips to the hardware store where she bought the cheapest versions of everything, learning as she went. She was not a contractor. She was not handy. She was a desperate woman doing her best, and sometimes her best was not enough. She tried to fix a leaky pipe under the kitchen sink and flooded the cabinet. She attempted to replace an electrical outlet and tripped the breaker for the whole house. But she kept trying. Every failure taught her something. Every small success built her confidence. I helped where I could. I learned to hold the flashlight steady, to hand her tools, to run to Mrs. Kowalski's house when we needed advice or another borrowed implement. I was 7 years old, becoming a helper instead of just someone who needed help. It changed something in me. I stopped feeling like a burden and started feeling like a contributor. School became easier too. Now that we had an address in a stable neighborhood, I could register properly. I started at Madison Elementary School, where my teacher was a woman named Lori Brennan. She was younger than Mr. Dupree, with red hair and freckles, and she smiled like she meant it. When she learned our situation, she connected my mother with the school's social worker, who helped us get food assistance and a referral to a clinic that offered sliding-scale health care. Slowly, the constant state of emergency we had been living in began to ease. But Gerald Briggs was not done with us. 2 months after we moved, he filed a small claims lawsuit against my mother, claiming she had damaged the motel room and owed him $500. It was completely fabricated. We had left that room cleaner than we found it. My mother had taken pictures on Mrs. Kowalski's phone before we left, specifically because she suspected he might try something. She had learned not to trust people who smiled while they hurt you. The court date was set for early March. My mother was terrified. She had never been to court before, had no idea how to defend herself, and certainly did not have money for a lawyer. Pastor Morales connected her with a legal aid attorney named Rachel Kim, who agreed to take the case pro bono. Rachel was sharp, efficient, and deeply uninterested in Gerald's nonsense. She prepared my mother for testimony, reviewed the photographs, and filed a counterclaim for harassment. The day of the hearing, I stayed with Mrs. Kowalski while my mother went to court. I was too anxious to focus on anything. Mrs. Kowalski tried to distract me with cookies and cartoons, but I just kept watching the clock. When my mother finally came home, she was smiling so wide I thought her face might break. Rachel had destroyed Gerald's case in under 10 minutes. The photographs proved the room had been clean. The judge had dismissed his claim and warned him about filing frivolous lawsuits. It was not a huge victory in the grand scheme of things, but it felt massive to us. Spring came, and with it, new challenges. The roof had several leaks, and we did not have money to replace it. My mother went to a community development organization called Home Together, which helped low-income homeowners with critical repairs. They evaluated our house and agreed to help with the roof, but there was a waiting list. We were number 47. My mother put buckets under the leaks and waited. While we waited, she started a garden in the backyard. She had never gardened before, but Mrs. Kowalski was an expert and taught her everything. They planted tomatoes, peppers, beans, and squash. I helped dig holes and plant seeds, getting dirt under my fingernails and sun on my face. It was hard work, but it was good work. It felt like building something instead of just surviving. The garden actually grew. I was stunned the first time I saw a tiny green tomato on the vine. It seemed like magic that we had put seeds in the ground and food was appearing. We ate our first homegrown salad in June, and my mother cried again. She cried a lot that first year. Happy tears, sad tears, frustrated tears, exhausted tears. I learned that tears were not always bad. Sometimes they were just proof that you were still feeling things, still fighting, still alive. By the end of summer, we had enough vegetables that my mother started giving them away to neighbors. She would load up a basket and walk down the street, knocking on doors, offering tomatoes and peppers to anyone who wanted them. It was her way of giving back, of being part of the community instead of just the charity case. People started to know us. We were not just the poor woman and her kid anymore. We were Diana and Emma Patterson, the ones with the garden. In August, we finally got to the top of the waiting list for the roof repair. A crew came out and spent 3 days replacing all the shingles, fixing the rotted sections of decking, making everything sound and waterproof. My mother watched them work with tears streaming down her face. No more buckets, no more waking up to the sound of dripping water, just a solid roof over our heads. That fall I started 3rd grade. I had friends now, real friends, not just kids who tolerated me. I invited 2 of them over to our house for the first time, and I was nervous about what they would think. Our furniture was still mostly donated and mismatched. We still did not have a lot, but my friends did not care. We played in the backyard, ate tomatoes straight off the vine, and they told me they thought my house was cool. I believed them. My mother got promoted at the diner. She was now a shift supervisor, which meant slightly more money and slightly more predictable hours. She was able to quit one of her other jobs. She was sleeping more. She was smiling more. She was turning back into the person I remembered from before my father died, before the medical bills, before the motel. Not the same person exactly, but someone recognizable. Winter came again, our second in the house. The heating system was still inadequate, but we had space heaters and thick blankets and each other. We were warm enough. We had food in the pantry. We had a Christmas tree, a small one that we decorated with homemade ornaments and strings of popcorn. It was the best Christmas I could remember. We did not have expensive presents. My mother gave me a book and a new pair of shoes. I gave her a drawing I had made, a picture of our house with flowers all around it. She hung it on the refrigerator and told me it was perfect. In the spring, something unexpected happened. A real estate developer approached my mother about buying our house. The neighborhood was being targeted for redevelopment, and they were buying up properties, planning to renovate and flip them. They offered her $50,000. It was more money than my mother had ever seen in her life. It was enough to buy a better house in a better neighborhood with money left over. But my mother said no. She said no because this house was ours. We had earned it. We had bled for it. We had fixed it with our own hands. It was not just a house anymore. It was proof that we could survive anything. It was the foundation of our new life. The developer came back with a higher offer, $60,000. My mother said no again. They told her she was being foolish, that the neighborhood would change with or without her, that she should take the money while she could. She closed the door in their faces. Not everyone understood her decision. Pastor Morales gently suggested that $60,000 could change our lives. Rachel Kim said she was proud of my mother for standing her ground, but wanted to make sure she was thinking clearly. Even Mrs. Kowalski asked if she was sure. My mother was sure. This was not about money. This was about belonging to something, about having something that could not be taken away. But the developer was not finished. Over the next few months, they bought every other house on our block. One by one, our neighbors sold and moved away. Mrs. Kowalski was one of the last to go. She cried when she told us. Her children were pressuring her to take the money, to move closer to them, to stop being so stubborn. She told my mother she was sorry. She told us we were the best neighbors she had ever had. She moved out in June, and I cried for days. Suddenly, we were alone on our block. Every house except ours was owned by Riverstone Development Corporation. They brought in contractors and started renovating the properties. The sound of hammers and saws became our daily soundtrack. We watched our neighborhood transform around us. New siding, new windows, new roofs, new landscaping. Everything pristine. Everything expensive. Everything designed to attract buyers with money. And then the problem started. The construction crews would block our driveway with their trucks. My mother would ask them to move, and they would, but slowly, grudgingly, making it clear she was an inconvenience. Their construction debris would blow into our yard. Nails, scraps of wood, shingles. I stepped on a nail once, and it went through my shoe into my foot. My mother had to take me to the emergency room. She tried to talk to the site supervisor, a man named Don Krieger. He apologized, but did nothing to fix the problem. The noise was constant, starting at 7 in the morning, running until 6 at night. Hammering, sawing, drilling, men shouting to each other. We could not have a conversation in our own house without raising our voices. My mother called the city to complain about the noise ordinances being violated. The city sent an inspector. He talked to Don Krieger. The noise continued. Then our water was shut off. We woke up one morning to find no water coming from any faucet. My mother called the water company. They said there had been a construction accident. A crew working on one of the renovated houses had damaged a water main, and it would take several hours to fix. The water was out for 3 days. 3 days of no showers, no washing dishes, no flushing toilets properly. We had to go to a community center to use their facilities. When my mother complained to Don Krieger, he said it was not his fault and she should talk to the water company. Our electricity went out next. Another construction accident. This time it took 2 days to restore power. We lost everything in our refrigerator. My mother filed a complaint with Riverstone Development, asking to be reimbursed for the food we lost and the inconvenience we suffered. They sent back a letter saying they were not responsible for accidents and suggesting she file a claim with the utility company. The utility company said it was the contractor's fault. The contractor said it was not their problem. I started having nightmares. I dreamed that our house was shrinking, that the other houses were growing larger and squeezing us out. I dreamed that men with hammers were knocking down our walls. I woke up crying, and my mother would hold me and tell me everything was fine, but I could hear the fear in her voice. She was realizing that saying no to the money was only the first battle. They were going to make us regret staying. School became difficult again. The constant stress at home was affecting my concentration. My grades dropped. I started getting stomach aches every morning. Ms. Brennan noticed and asked if everything was okay at home. I told her about the construction, the noise, the utilities being shut off. She reported it to the school's social worker, who called my mother. They had a long conversation. The social worker documented everything, told my mother this sounded like harassment, and gave her contact information for several organizations that might be able to help. My mother reached out to Fair Housing Coalition, a nonprofit that dealt with housing discrimination and harassment. She spoke with an advocate named James Crawford. He listened to our story and said it sounded like intentional interference designed to force us to sell. He said it was illegal, but proving it would be difficult. He agreed to send a letter to Riverstone Development on our behalf, demanding they take responsibility for the damages and disruptions. Riverstone responded with their own letter, denying any wrongdoing and suggesting my mother was being oversensitive. They claimed all the incidents were accidents, that construction was inherently disruptive, and that they had tried to be good neighbors despite her refusal to cooperate with the neighborhood improvement project. The letter was professionally written and carefully worded, but the message was clear. Leave or things will get worse. Things got worse. Someone spray-painted graffiti on our fence. Someone threw a brick through our front window. Someone slashed the tires on my mother's car. Each time we called the police. Each time they took a report and said there was no evidence of who did it. The police officer, a tired man named Sergeant Mark Holloway, told my mother off the record that this kind of thing happened in neighborhoods undergoing redevelopment. He said she might want to consider taking the developer's offer. He said it like he was giving helpful advice, not realizing he was telling her to surrender. My mother stopped sleeping. She would sit up at night watching the street, making sure no one was approaching our house. She installed a security camera, a cheap one she bought online. The video quality was poor, but it was something. She put up motion sensor lights. She reinforced our locks. She was turning our home into a fortress, and I could see what it was costing her. The light in her eyes was dimming again. I heard her on the phone one night talking to Rachel Kim. She was crying, saying she did not know how much more she could take. She said maybe she had been stupid to think she could fight a development corporation. Maybe she should just take whatever offer they would give her now and get out. Rachel talked her down, reminded her of her rights, reminded her that she had the law on her side. But I could hear the doubt in my mother's voice. The next incident was the worst. We came home from grocery shopping to find our back door kicked in. Someone had broken into our house. They had not stolen anything valuable because we did not have anything valuable to steal, but they had trashed the place. Furniture overturned, dishes broken, clothes thrown everywhere. And in the middle of the living room floor, they had spray-painted a message in red paint: "Sell out or get out." My mother called the police again. Sergeant Holloway came, took pictures, took statements, and told us to make a list of anything stolen or damaged. He said break-ins were common in transitional neighborhoods. My mother asked if he was seriously calling this just a break-in. She pointed to the spray-painted message. Holloway looked at it and said it was probably just vandals. He did not sound convinced. He sounded like a man who had given up expecting justice. That night my mother made a decision. She called James Crawford at Fair Housing Coalition and told him we needed to escalate. She called Rachel Kim and asked if there were any legal options. She called a local news station that did consumer advocacy reporting and left a message describing our situation. She stopped being polite and started being loud. If Riverstone Development wanted a fight, she would give them one. The news station called her back. A reporter named Melissa Torres came to interview us. She brought a camera crew and documented everything. The spray-painted message that my mother had not yet cleaned up, the broken window patched with cardboard, the construction debris in our yard, the security camera footage of trucks blocking our driveway. Melissa asked questions, took notes, and promised to look into it. The story aired 2 weeks later during the evening news. It was a 5-minute segment titled "The Last House Standing." It showed our house surrounded by renovated properties, showed the damage, showed my mother explaining what we had been through. It showed Melissa confronting a representative from Riverstone Development, who declined to appear on camera but issued a statement calling the allegations baseless. The segment ended with Melissa asking viewers if this was the kind of development their city wanted to encourage. The response was immediate. The news station received hundreds of calls and emails. Some people supported us, calling Riverstone Development bullies and demanding investigation. Others called my mother a troublemaker who was standing in the way of progress. The online comments were brutal. People I had never met had opinions about our lives, about whether we deserved to keep our home, about whether my mother was brave or foolish. I learned that being public meant being judged, and not everyone would be kind. But something shifted. The attention made it harder for Riverstone to continue their tactics. The construction debris stopped appearing in our yard. The trucks stopped blocking our driveway. Don Krieger stopped being dismissive when my mother approached him with concerns. They were being watched now, and they knew it. The harassment did not stop completely, but it became less obvious, more subtle. More importantly, we were not alone anymore. Other homeowners who had been pressured by Riverstone came forward. We discovered there were 3 other families in the broader neighborhood who had refused to sell and were experiencing similar problems. James Crawford organized a meeting. We gathered in a community center conference room. 5 families who had been fighting individual battles, realizing we were part of something bigger. There was Marcus and Teresa Washington, an elderly couple who had lived in their house for 30 years. There was Kevin Patel, a single father with 2 teenagers. There was Rita Fernandez, a widow who ran a daycare out of her home. We shared our stories, and they were disturbingly similar. Pressure to sell, followed by construction disruptions, followed by vandalism and break-ins. We had all thought we were alone. We had all been made to feel like the problem was us. James helped us organize. We formed a homeowners association, even though we were not contiguous properties. We pooled our resources to hire an attorney who specialized in property rights and harassment cases. Her name was Margaret Singh, and she was expensive, but she was also willing to work on contingency if we had a strong case. After reviewing all our documentation, she said we did. She said what Riverstone was doing had a name: constructive eviction, making conditions so unbearable that owners felt forced to leave. Margaret filed a lawsuit against Riverstone Development on behalf of all 5 families. We sued for harassment, property damage, emotional distress, and punitive damages. The lawsuit made the news again. This time, the story was bigger. It was not just about one stubborn woman and her daughter. It was about a pattern of corporate intimidation. It was about what kind of city we wanted to live in. It was about whether having money meant having the right to push everyone else out. Riverstone fought back hard. They hired a team of attorneys from a downtown firm that charged more per hour than my mother made in a week. They filed motions to dismiss. They filed counterclaims, saying we were defaming them and damaging their business. They dragged the case out, buried us in paperwork, did everything they could to make us give up. But Margaret had expected this. She told us corporate litigation was a war of attrition, and we had to be prepared for a long fight. Months turned into a year. The lawsuit consumed our lives. My mother spent hours every week meeting with Margaret, reviewing documents, preparing testimony. I learned words like deposition and discovery. I watched my mother age under the stress. New lines appeared on her face. Her hair started turning gray, but she did not quit. None of the 5 families quit. We had come too far to surrender now. During this time, something beautiful happened. The community rallied around us. Local businesses donated money to our legal fund. A group of law students from the university volunteered to help Margaret with research. A nonprofit called Building Justice created a support network for families fighting gentrification and displacement. We were no longer just fighting for ourselves. We were fighting for everyone who had ever been told they did not belong, that they were in the way, that progress required their erasure. The trial date was set for October, 2 years after the lawsuit was filed. As it approached, Riverstone made settlement offers, first to each family individually, trying to divide us. When that did not work, they made a collective offer, $200,000 to drop the lawsuit and sign non-disclosure agreements. Margaret said it was a decent offer, that trials were risky, that we could lose everything. She said the decision was ours. We met as a group to discuss it. 200,000 split 5 ways was 40,000 each. It was life-changing money for all of us. Kevin could pay for his kids' college. Marcus and Teresa could retire comfortably. Rita could expand her daycare. My mother could finally fix everything wrong with our house and have a cushion for emergencies. It was tempting. It was so tempting. But accepting it meant signing away our right to tell our story. It meant letting Riverstone continue their practices unchallenged. It meant that what they did to us would stay hidden, and they would do it to the next family and the next, and the next. We took a vote. All 5 families voted to reject the settlement and go to trial. Margaret looked at us with something like awe and said she had never had clients with more courage. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Margaret presented our evidence methodically. Security camera footage, police reports, documentation of utility shutoffs, testimony from contractors willing to say they had been instructed to be especially disruptive around our properties, expert witnesses who explained constructive eviction and patterns of corporate harassment. I testified. I was 10 years old, and I sat in a witness box and told a judge and jury about stepping on that nail, about the nightmares, about watching my mother cry. Riverstone's attorneys tried to discredit us. They suggested we were exaggerating. They claimed the construction disruptions were normal and unavoidable. They pointed out that we had no direct proof anyone from Riverstone had committed vandalism or break-ins. They argued that we were trying to profit from routine business operations. Their strategy was clear: make us look like opportunists who were abusing the legal system for a payday. But Margaret was better. In her closing argument, she asked the jury a simple question. If everything Riverstone said was true, why had all these incidents stopped after the media attention? Why had the construction debris suddenly stopped blowing into our yards? Why had the utilities stopped being mysteriously disrupted? Why had all these supposed coincidences only happened to the families who refused to sell? She said the evidence spoke for itself, and it was telling a story about power, about intimidation, about a corporation that saw people as obstacles instead of human beings. The jury deliberated for 2 days. They found in our favor. They awarded us compensatory damages totaling $300,000, split among the 5 families. They also awarded punitive damages of $2 million. The punitive damages were designed to punish Riverstone and deter similar conduct. It was a complete victory. When the verdict was read, my mother grabbed my hand and squeezed so tight I thought she might break my fingers. Riverstone appealed, of course. Corporations always appeal. But Margaret said the verdict was solid, that appeals were rarely successful in cases with this much evidence. She was right. The appeal was denied 8 months later. Riverstone was ordered to pay the full judgment plus interest and legal fees. It was reported that the case cost them over $3 million total. Several news outlets ran stories about it. We became a symbol of successful resistance against gentrification. My mother's share of the settlement was $60,000. After taxes and legal fees, she netted about $45,000. It was the most money she had ever had at one time. She paid off every debt we had. She fixed everything in the house that needed fixing. She put the rest in savings for my college education. For the first time in my life, we were not just surviving, we were stable. But more than the money, we had proven something. We had proven that you did not have to be rich or powerful to fight back. You just had to be stubborn enough to refuse to disappear. The other families felt it too. Kevin's kids graduated high school and went to college. Marcus and Teresa lived in their house until they died years later, surrounded by family. Rita's daycare is still operating today. We all stayed in our homes. We all belonged. The neighborhood continued to change around us. The renovated houses sold for $500,000 each. Young professionals moved in, the kind of people who shopped at farmers markets and drove electric cars. The neighborhood got safer, cleaner, more expensive. Some people would say we benefited from the gentrification even as we fought it. Maybe that's true, but we had earned the right to benefit. We had refused to be erased. I grew up in that house. I went to middle school and high school while living there. I brought friends home. I had birthday parties. I did my homework at the kitchen table my mother finally bought. I learned to cook in that kitchen. I had my first kiss on that sagging porch. The house was never perfect. It was always a little shabby compared to the gleaming renovations around it, but it was ours. When I was 17, I asked my mother if she ever regretted saying no to that first settlement offer. If she thought it would have been easier to just take the money and leave. She thought about it for a long time before answering. Then she said that easy was not always right. She said that home was not just about walls and roofs. It was about proving to yourself that you could stand your ground. It was about teaching your daughter that some things were worth fighting for. I left for college when I was 18. Full scholarship to a state university, studying social work because I had learned that systems needed people inside them fighting to make them better. My mother cried when she dropped me off at my dorm. Happy tears this time. Proud tears. She drove back to our house, the house we bought for $20, the house we defended with everything we had. She still lives there. She will probably live there until she dies. I graduated, got my MSW, and now I work for an organization that helps families facing housing insecurity. I have met so many people like my mother. People who are one medical bill, one job loss, one piece of bad luck away from losing everything. People who are fighting systems designed to exclude them. People who refuse to disappear. I think about my mother counting out those $20 bills, risking everything on a broken-down house that no one else wanted. I think about how that moment changed everything. She is 60 now, retired from the diner, living off Social Security and the remains of that settlement money she invested carefully. Her garden is bigger than ever. She still gives away vegetables to neighbors, though most of the neighbors are different now. She knows she is a relic in a neighborhood that has moved on without her, but she does not care. She waves to the young professionals walking their designer dogs. She chats with the new families moving into the expensive houses. She belongs there as much as anyone. I visited her last weekend. We sat on that porch, the one she finally got around to fixing, and watched the sunset. She asked me about my work, about the families I was helping. I told her about a single mother I was working with who was about to be evicted, who reminded me so much of her. My mother asked what the woman needed. I said she needed about $3,000 to catch up on rent and avoid eviction. My mother said she would write a check. I told her she did not have to do that, that her money was for her retirement. She said she had more than enough, and besides, what was the point of winning if you did not help the next person fight their battle? She wrote the check right there, handed it to me, and told me to make sure it got to the woman. Then she smiled, that same smile I remembered from when I was 7 and we first walked into our falling apart house, the smile that said we were going to make it, whatever it took. That $20 bet changed everything. It gave us a home. It taught me resilience. It showed me that the world could be fought, that systems could be challenged, that ordinary people could win against powerful corporations if they refused to give up. It taught me that home was not just a place you lived. It was a place you fought for, a place you earned, a place you defended. My mother is my hero, not because she was perfect or because everything worked out easily or because the story is simple. She is my hero because when she had nothing, when everyone told her to give up, when the smart move would have been to walk away, she counted out $20 and bet on us. She bet on the possibility that we could build something from nothing. She bet that we deserved to belong somewhere. And she was right. We did deserve it. We still do. Everyone does.